Hello, hello. We're good? All right, welcome everybody. Welcome, welcome. Grab a seat, grab some coffee, get comfy. We are going to get kicked off here and get started. Well, that is a super bright light. Yeah, if you want to come up here. So I'm Melissa Hovey, the Executive Director for Share Charlotte, for those that I haven't had the pleasure to meet yet. And welcome to the Agility Together series. This is our 11th session, which is unreal. I didn't think we thought we'd make it past 3. But this has all been informed by you and the topics that you want to hear about. So a huge thanks to our collaborators, Foundation for the Carolinas, the Lee Institute, and the United Way, for the collaboration on this initiative. Mental health has been something that has come up in the surveys that you guys and the feedback you give us a lot. What we've heard from you is, as a leader, I'm doing okay, but I'm really worried about my staff. And I'm worried about the long-term effects of the rise of community need and the lack of resources that we have. And so today we have a really special treat for you guys to hear really about from experts who work with high-performing athletes on how they manage that. And I had a chance to get a sneak peek and a preview into this about a year and a half ago, and it was amazing. And so you guys are in for a treat. So just a huge thanks to Novant Health for hosting us today, for bringing these resources to us. And I want to turn it over to Kristen Rivas with Novant Health to say a few words.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. We are proud to host you as the mental health support for nonprofit leaders. So I'm honored to be with so many of individuals who dedicate their time and talents and hearts to serving others. So nonprofit leaders carry a unique responsibility and many hats. You're often balancing limited resources, growing community needs, and the expectation of deliver meaningful results, all while supporting your teams, your volunteers, your donors, and the stakeholders that within your organization. So we look forward to today's conversation that provides practical insights, meaningful conversations, and strategies that we hope you can apply to your nonprofits professionally and personally. So do you want me to go ahead and introduce? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Joanne Perry. She is a wonderful speaker. I've not heard her, but I've heard many great things. Many great things about her. So I'm so excited to be in the room with you to listen to her. And then she'll tell you a little bit about herself. Dr. Perry?
Good morning. How are we feeling? Guys, so I'm Joanne. I work with Sport Psych. I'm joined by my incredible co-host facilitator today, Dr. Inyaka Nilamti. So I work in Sport Psych at Novant. I also am going into my 7th season as the team psych for the Panthers. So kind of trained as a clinician therapist by training, but do a lot of like mental performance work, try to support people to kind of be their best in a lot of different ways. Very similar, I imagine, to the work that you guys do, just in a different capacity. And this is Dr. Inyaka Nilamti that I lovingly invited this morning because we really enjoy presenting together. So I'll let her kind of tell you about her role.
Good morning, everyone. So Dr. Inyaka Nilamti, I am similar to Dr. Perry. I am a licensed psychologist with a sports psych background. Currently work as the VP of Wellness and Clinical Services for the National Football League. So that basically means is anything that's in the total wellness space under mental health, sort of my area. I get to work with all 32 teams and their clinicians. Also spent, say, probably the first half of my career working in nonprofits. So my first job was working with Girls and Girls Club. And so the work that you guys do is very near and dear to my heart. And so the hope is that this is a useful conversation that you walk away with some very practical and helpful tips and strategies.
So I'll say a couple qualifications. First, like we're both therapists by training. I think we have quite a few therapists in the room, which I love that. That means we're gonna ask a ton of questions today, so y'all get ready to answer. The second thing I'll qualify, we're also super comfortable with silence. I don't know if any of you ever done therapy, but like your therapist will sit in that silence way longer, so you might as well just participate, right? So we'll start with that, but kind of in that vein. Oh, yeah, can we go to our deck? We will start by asking you guys some questions while they get the slides up. So Iñaki is gonna kind of wanted to open us up with like, what got you guys into this work? Why are you doing this? What interested you about nonprofit work? Why is this a passion of yours?
Because here's what we know, you don't do it for the money, right? And so the question is what's your why? I think, and to Dr. Perry's point, we're comfortable with silence. We like to say, you guys are gonna be the ones who are doing the heavy lifting. We like to facilitate the conversation. And what we know is that you guys will learn more from each other than you will from us in a lot of ways. And so, so that's where we'd start. What's your why? Why do you do this work? Yes.
I would say because of the mission and the impact of the mission and knowing you are directly impacting and changing people's lives and community.
Okay. All right. So the idea of mission, being able to have that influence and that impact.
I would just further that by saying, it's kind of a scary world we live in, right? Like you feel your way out, and this work allows you to kind of feel like you're being introverts in your community, which is like how if all else fails, kind of check on your neighbor, check on your little corner of the world and make it a better place and feel like you're really making a difference.
In some ways, it allows you to have some sense of control in a world that feels very out of control in some ways, right? Absolutely.
I like to give voice to those who can't speak for themselves. I just over time have learned, I didn't start off like that, but I think now it's really to kind of give voice to those who can't speak for themselves.
So some of the forgotten folks, maybe, right? I love that.
So all of what they said, and I'm going to take a little bit of a different swing at this. For me, I'm creative, innovative, entrepreneurial, and so I love the opportunity to be in a smaller organization and try new things. It just really fills me up, but try new things to produce a certain positive outcome for the people that I care about.
So in a lot of ways, it's a lot of flexibility, right? When you're wearing multiple hats, because you don't have a whole lot of resources, you get to try a lot of different things, an opportunity to be creative. Let's hear from somebody we haven't heard from this side of the room yet. Why do you do this work?
I was a stay-at-home mom for 16 years, and I wanted to get back into work, but I wanted it to be as fulfilling as being a stay-at-home mom. So I knew that I wanted to help people, just like I was doing for so long, and then that's why I'm here.
And so what we get a sense of is you guys are all givers, right? Lots of caring, providing to others. And I think that what ends up happening a lot of times is you give so much, and you are often the person that does not necessarily get a lot of give to. And so as you look at the title for this conversation, one of the other things that we'd like to hear from you all is, what prompted you to come and spend your time here this morning, right? Like, time is the only thing that we don't make more of. You can't get it back. And so just curious about how you decided to, what's one thing that you hope to walk out of here with? I'm gonna pick on this table back here.
The mental health part of all the jobs and all of the stress we carry, and the many hats we wear. So peace of mind, how to relax in certain situations, how to take a step back and breathe, and be there for our team members when the challenges arise.
Okay. So, we talk a lot about sort of how do you find some moments of, I think we work in a space that's 24/7, right? And so we often talk about how do you find moments of sort of sanity in a sort of dysfunctional system, right? And so we think about strategies. How do you sort of find a way to take a step to breathe and to support the folks that you work with as well? There was somebody at this table that raised their hand.
Oh, I was just going to say part of the reason that I came is because I can't do my job if I'm burnt out. And so like finding ways to prevent burnout so that I can keep doing my job at a level that allows me to provide for our residents and the people in our programs.
So what does prevention look like? And we'll talk about how we think about wellness, because a lot of times we don't think about our mental health or wellness until there's something wrong, right? Until we're already in the red. And so thinking a little bit about what does it mean to be proactive? What are things that we can put into place that allow us to function at a high level in a sustainable fashion, right? Something that you want to get out of this. I'm gonna pick on this table here. Something you want to get out of it. Jonathan. Yes. The downside of me knowing your name.
I mean, kind of to answer all your questions and then answer none of them. Kind of wellness, resiliency, the mission, like I just recognize either individually or even as a nonprofit, I cap what I'm able to accomplish by doing it for ourselves. So community engagement, helping others helps me, others helping me helps them, nonprofit. You know, we can't survive without collaboration and support and the people we serve, or just me. Like, I didn't get here by myself. Like, there's plenty of people that believed in me before I believed in myself, saw something in me before I saw things in myself. Growing up, I was very much in a marginalized community that could easily been forgotten and discarded. So, like, the people that we serve, like, we're helping them become who they really could be. And then it's how do we stay in the game, because if we don't burn out, the people that we can help and make a difference just is so immensely bigger.
Coming full circle.
I think one thing I'll say to that too, I heard so much of investing in wellness within a system makes that system better performing across the board. And I think y'all are doing that at the community level. We see that certainly at the team level, right? Like we see the teams that are investing in mental health and wellness of the athletes tend to be the higher performing teams, right? So I think that's not a coincidence. And maybe 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't the mindset, but I think it's with her work, it's shifting a lot considerably. And so I just wanted to call that out.
There was somebody else.
Life is hard. We have about 350 employees. 70% of them are female. 30 to 40% of those are single mommies working 2 jobs. So life is extremely challenging, and the world and the system is set up against them. So if I can find something to franchise here, we have a strategic goal to be an employer of choice. What does that mean? It's not just finances and benefits, but it's self-care and helping them be a better version of themselves. We're not just tending to the individuals we serve, but we're tending to our staff. I need you to give me something today that I can take back, and we can populate it through our organization.
I love that. And hopefully we can give you some very concrete, and I think we've got some really good examples of ways that we've tried to do this in the sports space. So awesome.
Yeah. And I'll just say really quick before we get into the spectrum, what we'll kind of walk through today, we're going to start with our roots. So we're going to start with the beliefs that make you guys high performing, high achieving, allow you to be this like purpose driven, vision driven person, but also kind of have a downside, right? When it comes to our own mental health, especially if those roots and beliefs are applied a little bit too rigidly. We're then going to move into our reps, which are those like skills and habits and environmental decisions that set you up for not just being okay, but being great and thriving. And then we're going to talk about that ripple effect. So how do I take from today what I've learned and let that ripple effect extend to my entire staff and organization? So that's kind of the framework that we'll work through. So I'll let Nyaka kind of create a foundation. Do we have a question over here?
Add one thing that I would like to come up with, which is more language to also talk up about how necessary this is.
for the need from these people?
And I think we work in a space that is very much outcome driven, right? And so being able to explain what's the ROI. And what we know is, and I think this speaks to Joanne's point, is what we know is that the teams that have invested more heavily in this space are the teams that are more high performing, right? When we look at who makes the playoffs, I can tell you exactly what their wellness structure looks like, right? And how much they prioritize this space. And so I do think being able to sort of speak to, hey, when you are investing in the self-care of your staff, your people, that's basically performance enhancement, right? And we have had owners say, this is, that's a competitive advantage for us, right? And so figuring out what's the language, how do I explain that? How do I share that? Absolutely. And so when we think about wellness, again, I think this is a term that in some ways has probably become overused in the last few years. And what we often see, especially in the space of sports, is when we think about wellness, we're thinking about physical wellness. And a lot of times that's at the detriment to mental wellness. And so what we've really done is work to expand our definition of mental health and wellness. I think, again, both of those, we typically wait until there's something wrong. A lot of times we use mental health as synonymous with mental illness. And so when we talk about stigma and we talk about sort of implementing strategies, a lot of times we're talking about what do we do when we get into that crisis space. And what we know is that this is something that exists on a continuum, from thriving and excelling, where you feel like you are sort of functioning on all pistons at your top, at your peak, all the way through existing, struggling, and then that idea of crisis, right? And so when we think a little bit about that relationship with stress and performance, what we know is you need a certain level of stress to perform at a high level, right? Like we would never say you need to try to figure out how to eliminate stress. And everybody has sort of their optimal stress threshold. But what we also know is that too much stress poorly managed over time then contributes to burnout, withdrawal, mental health concerns, all of the things that we see sort of more on that crisis and struggling end of the continuum. And what we've suggested, and this is language that we use with the players, is just like athletes wake up in the morning and they sort of take a physical assessment, right? Depending on what's tight, what's tense, that might inform how they train that day. That might inform how much time they spend in the training room. That might inform how they stretch. Doing the same thing from a mental health perspective. Like waking up in the morning and trying to figure out where on this continuum am I? And if I realize that I'm in the thrilling and excelling part of it, trying to figure out what did I do yesterday? Or what is it that I'm doing that's allowed me to be in this? Right? So yesterday I exercised, I got solid sleep, I connected with a really good friend. And similarly, when I find that I'm on the existing or I'm slipping more towards this crisis piece, what might be the contributing factors, right? Oh, you know what? I skipped my workout. I had a conversation with somebody that I know is an energy vampire, right? Because what it does is it allows us to have control. It allows us to be intentional about how we move up and down that continuum, right? In a space that I think a lot of times we tend to think of as us not having a whole lot of control around. And so with that, that's the framework that we use as we're having these conversations. So thinking about what moves you more towards the thriving and excelling piece, and how you can intentionally intervene along the path to make sure that you're going in that direction. So.
And at the base of this, I think at the heart of everything Inyaka's talking about is self-awareness, right? Like a lot of the clients that we work with don't even realize that they're here, and they don't catch it. And I imagine a lot of the communities that you work with, we're here and we're not aware of it, right? And so what I think is really cool is when we can bring that level of self-awareness. To Inyaka's point, this doesn't eliminate stress, this is just managing stress. Everything, like in the NFL, like there is going to be stress. We just had our rookie OTAs come in. Y'all, they're gonna be stressed, right? Trying to make the team is an incredibly stressful process. We can't eliminate that, but we can manage it a little bit better. And I think for athletes that tend to be really solution focused and action oriented, they feel more empowered by that. And just like, they can do things to optimize their physical recovery, how do we do things to optimize our mental recovery? And I think that's some of the language that we can use around this. So we'll kind of start on this awareness piece. We're gonna get a little bit vulnerable in here. Y'all ready for that? We ready? I'm sorry, I qualified. We're therapists. So we're gonna kind of start with our own self-beliefs, and I will self-disclose a little bit as well. When I was making these slides, well, this isn't a self-disclosure, this is more disclosure for her. When I was making these slides, I sent her a photo of one of the slides, and I was like, does this sound like anyone? With like the eyeball emoji. So we're gonna start here. No, of course not. So we're gonna start with our roots. What I mean by roots is like, these are those beliefs that we use to approach our work, who we are, what we care about, our value system. But I want us to think a little bit about what are those beliefs that I hold about my work, and maybe productivity is a word that comes to mind, maybe efficiency is a word. What comes to mind for you guys? What are those beliefs? Yeah.
Like my work is based on how much I produce.
Yep, my work is based on how much I produce. Can others relate to that? For sure. Any other beliefs? Oh, yes.
I always preach to my staff and also try to live it myself that family always comes first.
Love that. That is a wonderful value. Yes. How does that impact your leadership and the way you kind of set up the culture in your organization?
I preach that so that if something comes up, say, drop what you're doing, family comes first.
I love that.
Deal with it, we'll be here when you come back, and I try to model it.
I love that.
Something happens, I'm out.
That's that value. Wonderful. Other thoughts? Yes.
This is interesting because it's changing for me, but my values on being a team player, I put a lot of value on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm learning with new generations coming in that work-life balance, because I would say up here, yes, family first, but then I might not practice that, and I might throw a judgment on a younger colleague if they so it's like, okay, so it's like I have these values, but I'm constantly feel like now I'm kind of reevaluating them and what's healthy and
Yeah.
what's not.
There's a little dissonance there, right? Because again, a lot of our world conditions us to be productive and to achieve and to do things. And I love that you're aware of that. Like, that's the first step, right? We're not always perfectly consistent with our values, but it's kind of like at the end of the day, can I do a check on like what percentage of my decisions were consistent with my values and what percentage were not? And just kind of building that awareness can be really, really helpful. So we're gonna start talking about this high performer paradox, okay? So what we mean by this, again, when I heard a little bit about what drew you guys to this work, honestly, it sounds very similar to what we hear from athletes. It's incredibly value-driven, community-driven. I want to make a difference. I want to support people that are trying to support themselves. I am doing this for a reason, right? Like a mission and a value. And I want to be my best and I want to do things the best, because if I can do that, then I can help my communities. That's what I'm hearing in all of you. So whenever it's value-driven and mission-driven and purpose-driven, there is this kind of pressure of like, I want to be successful because this matters to me, right? Like, I really want to be good at this. And what we know is that a lot of these perspectives can be helpful, but they also have a little bit of a dark side if left unchecked. So we're going to talk about being achievement-oriented, having really high standards, and this wonderful one called extreme responsibility, which I'm sure no one will relate to in this. So we're going to talk first about achievement-oriented. So this is like, if we could like summarize this belief into a sentence, I want to grow, improve, and accomplish meaningful things, right? We love this in our staff. We love this in ourselves. We love this in our staff because we're striving for excellence, right? We want to produce. We're committed to development and wanting to be a master at our craft and being great at what we do. We're disciplined. We're goal-directed. We make those short-term sacrifices to pursue our long-term goals. We do all these good things. What are the pitfalls with this? What do you guys think are some of those pitfalls? Where, if left unchecked, what happens here? Yes.
Like if you've been working so hard to achieve something and then you don't get it, it makes it so much worse because you've just sacrificed so many other things.
Yes.
To get there, whether that be in your personal life or other work responsibilities to focus on. And then if you don't get the email back, you don't get the, yes, we're going to fund you at whatever level you asked, then that makes that feel a lot worse.
What does it feel like?
Failure.
Yep. Yep. So my relationship with failure may not be helpful for me. because there's a lot of hopelessness, there can be a lot of disappointment, there can be a lot of self-criticism that comes up when we encounter failure. And who has never failed in their life? I know I have, right?
And I was going to say, it's the idea of failure, and again, we see this a lot in our space, right? The idea that outcome is the only thing that matters.
We can't really hear when they talk over there.
Oh.
Stand or when people talk, I'm just like listening to their saying.
Sure, absolutely. We'll double down on it. Yes, ma'am. Any other thoughts? Any other pitfalls that might come up? Yes.
When you're always striving, you don't stop to celebrate the win.
Yes.
So it's all about the next one and the next one and the next one. That's exhausting.
Yes. We call that like an achievement treadmill, right? Like I'm always having to achieve, and I kind of think that my next dose of happiness and dopamine is caught up in the next accomplishment. And so I'm always looking forward. Like we see this all the time in our players, like they'll make the team, maybe they're an undrafted free agent, right? Which chances of making a team are a little bit lower, but then they'll make the team, and then it'll be, well, I want to be a starter. And then it'll be, I want to be a Pro Bowler. And then it's, I want to make it to the playoffs. So it's always this next thing, which is awesome. We love that. I want to be goal-directed, but we got to celebrate the good stuff, because if we don't celebrate the good stuff, we don't get any of the positive emotions that are associated with that. So, yes. Any other thoughts on pitfalls? Yes.
I find highly driven achievement people, they can be really unkind and critical of themselves. And if left unchecked, that tends to bleed out into other relationships where they can be really critical and unkind to others.
Yes. I can be a little judgmental to my husband. I'm gonna be honest. I love him, obviously, but I'm probably a little more on this than he is. And I need that balance, but sometimes I'm like, did you not? Like, and I have to check that, right? I gotta check that initial judgment. So yes. I think you guys hit all of these. The other thing I'll say is when we're really achievement oriented, we have a lot of guilt when we rest, right? We have a lot of guilt when we'll give you guys a self-care. I love the nodding, like yes. We'll give you guys a self-care assessment. One of the signs that I maybe don't have the best self-care practices is I don't feel like when I'm resting, I feel kind of anxious and uncomfortable because I'm not used to it, and I don't feel like I deserve it because I didn't achieve enough, right? So we'll then kind of go into high standards. So this is I want things done well. Who can relate to this one? Yeah, the whole room, right? I want things done well. We love this one. Super strong accountability for yourself, for others. I'm committed to excellence, right? Anything I produce is gonna be super high quality because I know, and it matters, and it's value driven, and I love that. I'm gonna have consistency in my effort. I'm gonna be attentive to detail. I'm gonna prepare. I'm gonna persist even when things get difficult. I will continue persisting because I want things done well. And I refuse to settle for mediocrity, right? Like I don't want that at all. What are the pitfalls? Yes. She said it becomes impossible to prioritize anything, right? Everything becomes important. And everything, the little things that aren't that important still have to be done at a really high standard. Did I get that okay? Yes, yes. Yes. That is so well said. Difficult to delegate. Why? Because nobody does it as good as me, right? Yes.
Here, can I have you speak into the mic just so our friends?
We have friends online too.
Oh, yes.
Okay. That's absolutely something I struggle with because my challenge is my first go-to thought is not, let me ask for help, let me ask for support. Because I am the support, I am the help,
Yep.
I'm the go-to fix-it person that everybody is coming to. So I don't even think of asking for that support. And so I'm drowning while I'm pulling everybody else's lifeboat. So.
And I'm not going to ask for help because maybe y'all won't get it done to the level I want it to get done to. And so then I keep taking on more and more and more and more. And it's this cycle, right? I see knowing nods, so I know y'all are relating to this. Any other pitfalls here? Yes.
I think another pitfall, if your organization collaborates a lot, this might not be a realistic wish because not everyone, it seems, wants to get it done well. They just want it done to check it off the box. So
Yes.
it can be hard not to like feel that personally and be like, ugh, but we're all signing off together. So
Yes.
that's hard to let go of that.
I think it can be, for me, that can be so frustrating. Like if I have an idea and I want it to be done really well, and then maybe someone I have to collaborate with doesn't do that or see it in that way, it's incredibly frustrating, discouraging. And then again, I go back to, if it's value driven, y'all care about this stuff, right? You want it done. And the quickest path to rage is when you encounter a system that doesn't value your values, right? And so if I value high standards and this is really important work to me, and I encounter someone or a partner that doesn't, I'm gonna feel rage. And that's a super depleting emotion. Make sense? I think, again, y'all are so smart. I think y'all hit all of them. Jonathan mentioned earlier kind of like feeling resentment and judgmental towards other people. I think this comes up a lot when we employ high standards. Also, chronic feelings of not enough, right? We always have that. Like, it could always be better. I could always do more. And then I can relate to this. Sometimes we unintentionally put pressure on our teams and on other people. Like, I've even gotten this feedback sometimes. Like, I'll create things and my team has said to me in like kind of a joking way, but I take note of it, oh man, it's not even worth me creating it because like your stuff's always gonna look better, right? And I promise that's not me bragging. I just am obsessive over how things look. But I think it unintentionally puts pressure on your staff, and then it can be unmotivating to them if you don't check this. And so that's where like affirming and validating and like making sure we're hyping up our teams can be really, really important. The last thing I will say, and this is where I'm gonna call out my lovely friend, extreme responsibility, right? This is the one I texted her with like the eyes, right? So if something needs to get done, I will make sure it happens. I'm gonna make sure that happens. We love staff members, we love people like this. There's a really strong sense of ownership, high level of productivity, reliable, dependable, always showing up. Leadership, right? Follow through, problem solving. What are the pitfalls here?
Not letting others grow.
Say that.
You're not letting others grow into their responsibility.
Yes, development maybe doesn't happen as much, right? Other thoughts? Yes, oh.
I was just gonna say it kind of puts too much unnecessary responsibility on yourself, and kind of like what someone else said, like you're not giving other people a chance to collaborate with you.
Yes. And when we talked about burnout earlier, for sure.
These people have real difficulty saying no.
Yep.
And I've found with my work with resiliency and burnout, like removing something has a bigger impact than even with like wellness and mental health. We're always adding something more. We're adding something more. But the ability to kind of prune our lives is really, it limits a lot of our strategies or techniques because something's got to go. That's part of the system of high performers. It's your entire life. You're adding more, you're adding more. You don't say no, you don't know how to let go, delegate, collaborate, things along those lines.
Well said. Boundaries are really hard. We always talk about this kind of in relationships, but I think it applies. I think this is a quote. The best way to see if someone kind of supports you is how they respond to a boundary. So if you set a boundary and they're really supportive of that and encouraging of that, and they're like, yes, do that, take some time, that feels different than someone that judges you and criticizes you for that. And so I think we always teach them it's a good kind of test and like a good way to gather information on a relationship. So absolutely, difficulty setting boundaries here.
I think this one oh, I'm loud. No problem. I think this one, I think this one and the last one, it also shuts down new ideas. It shuts down innovation. It's like if I'm the only one doing it, I may not be as fabulous as I think I am. So we need those other ideas. We need, especially when we have younger people on the team. I get to work a lot with young people through a nonprofit in town, and it's like they come up with the most creative ways. And sometimes it's just taking a look at it from a different, and if I'm the only one doing it, nothing new is going to get done.
Yeah, miss out. So I think we can see that and the one thing I'll say too, and this kind of relates to this, when I overfunction, I enable underfunctioning of other people on my staff, right? Or other people that I'm working with. And again, if I'm enabling that, I'm telling them that's okay. So I think what we wanted to point out is how some of these beliefs help you be really successful, but they also kind of can contribute to this pattern that a lot of high performers find themselves in, where they feel like they're kind of drowning, there's no help, they don't know what to do. A lot of this, and I'm not calling you guys out on this, but a lot of this is like, we put that out there, right? We've set up our teams and our style of work in a way that sets us up for this. Is that kind of making sense a little bit? Great, now we're gonna have y'all talk about it.
Yes. All right, so we're gonna give you your tables, and if you're at a table by yourself, make a friend. We're gonna give you 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
3 minutes.
5 minutes maybe?
Okay,
Yeah.
5 minutes. She's much more generous than I am. So just have a conversation with the folks at your tables. These are the questions we want you to start thinking a little bit about and sharing with each other. And then we'll have some folks report out. So
Can y'all see those okay?
so let's get friendly over here. All right. So let's hear from a couple of folks. All right, let's hear what's one question that you answered and one thing that you learned from the discussion, from the conversation at your table.
We were just talking about really appreciating the idea of the kind of morning check-in, right? This idea of that many of us kind of do intuitively, I think, like whether it's the physical or mental, but also the like, then what? Right? Like, so yes, I'm able to check in with myself and notice that I'm here on the continuum or there, but then being able to give yourself the permission or the grace to say, because I'm here or there on this day, I can make these choices. Like, that's the empowerment. And I think for us, just talking through that a little bit, like, what does that look like? How does it show up for you? You know, or just questions that, you know, surfaced as a part of that conversation.
Absolutely. Allows you to be a little bit more intentional, right? And, you know, I'm gonna be honest, depending on the day, some days I might move a meeting or two. So like, today is not the day for me to be having this conversation with this person. I think I might move this to Friday, right? And so I think it's that empowerment piece, right? It gives you some sense of control. Awesome, love it. Anybody else? Something that you learned?
We spent a little bit more time talking about the things that move us left and, you know, get us into that maybe crisis or struggling point. And a theme that came up here was avoidance of the things that are hard for so long until we reach that tipping point where it comes out as emotion or kind of a emotional collapse. And so that was a theme, as well as many of us turn inward and stop communicating with others, stop asking for help, stop naming that we're struggling, which then perpetuates that kind of buildup of stress. And so identifying those patterns before we get to that point is something I think we all could benefit from working on.
So I love that. One of the things that we do with prospects, so these are guys before they even get to the league, is we talk about the fact that they're stepping into a space that's super exciting and super stressful, right? I think, and taking the idea of stress as, taking it from just being this overly negative thing to being able to say stress is distress and eustress, right? So positive things also create stress. And you're walking into a space where there is a spotlight on you. So I need you to know what stresses you, what your tell is, right? So if you are the kind of person who gets irritable when you're stressed, you might say something to a coach that then puts you in a position where you lose your job. And so that point of that being able to self-reflect, to say, okay, you know what, do I recognize these patterns that I sort of engage in that I might need to be a little bit more proactive about addressing? And that requires you to take the time to be self-reflective, right? Which a lot of times we don't necessarily always allow ourselves to take as well, right? This is one more.
I just wanted to say we said the same thing, but some of the resources that we talked about at the table that one was very new to me, and I'm very excited to go back and check this out, is the book Who Not How. And what I wrote down that Angie shared was that when you're stressed, or especially when you're procrastinating, is one of the things we talked about, is that you don't need to figure out how to do it, you have to figure out who needs to do it. And that's a challenge for a lot of us in the room when we want to hold things close to the vest, or it takes time to figure out the who, and it's hard, but it is sometimes helpful. I just felt like that was a really helpful framing, and I'm going to check out that book. So Who Not How. And then two was that I just finished a master class on conflict resolution, and they talked about looping. And it's where, like, if you're experiencing conflict in the workplace, or someone's triggered or stressed, being able to get them to talk about it and repeat it back to them, sometimes just being heard is really valuable. And we talked about how as leaders, sometimes we don't have the person to loop to us. And so finding people in our circle that we can talk to and just be heard and then hear it back can help us process our own feelings.
So there's a lot that we just heard in that, right? So I think there are a couple things that I think about. I think about so the idea of who, not how, even taking the time to think about how do I delegate, who do I delegate to? when we think about the fact that it takes time in terms of minutes or that in the moment, but the cost, if we push through, ends up costing more on the back end, right? So being able to sort of say, okay, this is short term, yeah, it might be a little bit longer, but long term, this is gonna pay dividends. I think the other piece also, we talk about emotional, so being able to identify your emotions in the moment. And again, when you're in a space where you are literally going from this thing to the next thing to the next, we don't really take the time to do that, to allow ourselves to do that. And then the last piece is that social support. Making sure that everybody here has your board of directors, your squad, right? Which is the language that we use a lot of times. Thinking about who is that? What does that look like? And if you don't have that, it's time to start building it. I'll tell prospects, if you don't have social support, if you don't have a support system, now, before you get into this league, it will tear you up. You cannot survive at this level without that. And so I think a lot of times usually you're the support for everybody else, but really being thoughtful about, okay, so who is my support and how do I make sure I'm cultivating that?
Right. Yeah, perfect. I think this leads us really nicely into the next section, which is our reps, right? Someone mentioned, I think about this spectrum and where I'm at each morning, and then what? The reps are the and then what, right? This is what I'm doing to make sure that I'm keeping myself on that right side of the spectrum. We want to think about, like, what are the things that I do intentionally and consistently that allow me to be at my best? So it might be accessing, the number of times I call her throughout the week is shocking. And it's like, hey, can you just tell me that I'm thinking about this in the right way, right? Like, I just need you to kind of validate and normalize this for me. It might be when I get home at night, like telling my husband, I need 30 minutes. I've been overstimulated and I've talked a lot today. Can I just have a little silence, right? Like, it might be these little habits. I think in the last session we had someone say that at every stop sign she approaches, she takes a deep breath. Like, I thought that was such a cool rep throughout the day of, like, this is something I'm going to encounter every day, and I'm just going to kind of pair a wellness strategy with that. So we want to think about that, and the key here is if I'm using that spectrum, I'm going to start to notice those habits that keep me more on the thriving side, and I'm also going to know the habits that kind of pull me to that left side. So that's really helpful. So we want to kind of think through skills, habits, and environments. So skills are kind of those things that I'm employing intentionally, right? We'll talk about a couple of them, but a lot of the times for athletes, breathwork's a really easy one. It's like how we're speaking to ourselves, our self-talk imagery, visualization, relaxation strategies, mindfulness. We talk about reset routines, and y'all can use that. Like, if you know you're not in a headspace to have a meeting, but maybe this isn't a meeting you can move. How do I reset in that moment so I show up in the way that I want to show up and I show up in the way that's consistent with my values? My habits, what's my process? How do I prepare for things? What are my coping routines? How do I frame situations, right? Like, instead of a challenge, do I frame it in my mind as an opportunity? Like, what are these little tricks that I'm doing? It might be like, if you have an off day, I can relate to this. Y'all probably can too. I don't know what to do with off days. Like, I really struggle. Our athletes really struggle with off days too. Like, they're so used to being just like scheduled, and then they get to their off day and they're like, what am I supposed to do with my hands? Like, I don't know. And so how do we structure that, right? How do I make sure those off days are restorative for me? How do I incorporate music? And then phone use. What are my boundaries and habits around my phone that may be pulling me to that good side of the spectrum or contributing to this other side? And then lastly, I would say consider your environment, right? What are the physical spaces that pull me to perform my best? I know for me, like, I try to get my work done at the office so that I'm not bringing that home as much because I'm a little bit less productive there. What does my digital environment look like? So who am I following? What am I like seeing on all of my different social media or news platforms? What are the cues in my environment? Photos, quotes, as little as that seems. Like, well, a lot of our players will put like a photo of their family in their lockers. So, like, every day before they go out, they'll like see their reason and see their why. And then my sleep environment, because we know sleep is the best recovery tool we have, and so many of us compromise that. So how am I structuring that? I'm gonna pause there. Can anyone give me some examples of this stuff that you have used, that you have found success with?
skills, habits, or the way you're setting up your environment. Yes.
You were talking a little bit about the digital connection and phone use and always being available. And I definitely am still working on this one, but I think that's something that is really powerful for me when I can leave work at work as well as the phone component.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So boundaries, right? I think someone mentioned that. Yeah.
I feel like for me, if it's scheduling allows, I like to take like micro breaks and like either use the Pomodoro method or whatever. It's either like a 40-20 or 90, whatever, but like, and go for like a quick walk, like go outside and just like take a walk, take a break, go away from my computer. Cause I feel like that really gives me a moment to kind of reflect on what I've been doing, take an actual physical break from where I am. And it kind of gives me time to kind of refocus and that helps me.
Love that. So back there, behind you.
I always like to start my day kind of moving in some way, form, stretching, walking the dogs. But I also try to give myself at least an hour to kind of be present, grounded, whether it's journaling or praying or doing a Bible study, and just kind of ending it with, you know, what is one thing I'm going to do for myself today, and what is it one thing I want to accomplish for work, but leave it as one thing, knowing there's going to be a lot more, but just so I feel like there's, you know, some successes each day, that it's not overwhelming.
Great examples, right? And what I would say, oh, did you have one over here?
So I keep 3-pound weights at my desk.
Ooh.
And so when I hit a wall or I'm feeling really stressed, I just get up and do 10 of them. And it just kind of gets the blood back flowing, but it's something that I feel is selfish. It's like I'm doing this just for me.
Yes.
And it just kind of refocuses me. But I keep them at my desk. And like I said, if I find myself wandering or whatnot, I just get up and, you know, staff comes by and sees me pumping, it's like shut the door. But it helps. It really does.
Honestly,
I love
though,
that.
Great
I love
modeling
that.
too, right? Like I love that your staff is seeing that, and I feel like that's like it's like empowering, right? In the middle of the day to just start lifting weights. Like I can see there's an emotional benefit with that too. So I think one thing I'll say, one challenge for you guys is I want everyone to leave here adding in at least one habit, which is that morning check-in. That morning check-in of where am I at on this spectrum, and what do I want to do to either keep myself here or to maybe move myself a step up. That's one habit that we can all do in the car, right? We can all do that on our drive-in. We can all dedicate 30 seconds to that. And then what that's gonna help us with is it's gonna really help us understand, like, I am not especially with athletes, like we're not in the business of giving them 80,000 things to do to make sure their mental health's in a good spot. It's really finding like, what are those things that are most efficient for me, that do the most, that I can add in pretty seamlessly.
And I'm going to go back to what she said. She said 30 seconds. So don't think if I can't spend 45 minutes or an hour doing this mindfulness, 30 seconds. Because I think that's what also stops folks, right? To say, oh, well, I don't have the time to really spend 30 seconds.
See high standards, right? If I can't do self-care the best, what's the point?
And she knits. And so what she does for her mood tracker is she knits one line in the color yarn of what she's feeling that day. And so she has a history, and she can go back and look at her calendar
Oh my gosh.
and say, why was I leading into mania here? Why was I dipping here? So it's actually valuable information, and you've got a snuggly blanket. And I mean, it just, I like that. And it was one row a day.
Love that.
I have a similar client who uses it, but with music. So he'll send me a photo of the song that he's listening to every morning that resonates with how he's feeling. But I love the creative tie-in there. Yep. So again, little things that we can add in. I do want to introduce this and talk a little bit about self-care, which we've all been talking about. But the reason that this is important is to the point of using language around mental wellness. I think I often talk through this with stakeholders, with coaches, with people that maybe don't invest a ton in self-care and don't understand the benefit of it. This is how I frame it to them. So I wanted to share that with you. So when we think about self-care, it's all the habits that we're talking about. What am I doing consistently to just kind of take care of myself? Little small habits. We all know that we can be stressed, and then we can also be overwhelmed. If I'm stressed, it's okay. Like, I know there's a lot, but I know I have the resources that I need to have to accomplish what I need to accomplish. When I get to overwhelmed, that's that feeling of, I don't know if I can do what I need to do, right? Like, I actually don't know if I can do this. I experience overwhelm as it feels like a 50-pound weight is sitting on my chest. My brain literally stops working. Like, usually my thoughts are fast because I have a little anxiety, but usually they just slow down. I kind of get in that like mind blank scenario. When we are talking with athletes, overwhelmed is where we start to see a performance impact. So if we look at these two athletes, the athlete on the left does a really poor job with their self-care, right? Their baseline stress, that walk-around stress that they're carrying every day, is really, really high. And so if you look at that green section of the graph, that's the stress of their current experience. Maybe it's a difficult practice. Maybe it's a 2-minute at the end of the game where they got a score, right? Whatever that stress is, encountering that stress put them over the threshold of feeling overwhelmed. So they're starting to get those performance impacts, right? Their brain's not working, they're not able to regulate their breath, all of that. The athlete on the right, really great self-care, right? Intentional, consistent self-care, lowering that baseline stress so that they can take on the stress of that current situation. Y'all, this is like the New York Knicks, right? Coming back with a 30-point deficit. They can take on, anyone Knicks fans in here? They can take on all the stress. Give me all the stress, because I got it handled, right? Those athletes that show up in those high pressure, high stress moments tend to have the best self-care practices because they stay under that threshold. We all have a threshold, right? Obviously, our resilience increases and lowers that. But when we talk about mental performance and mental wellness as a performance intervention, this is what we mean. And so we always say the stuff that you're doing off the field directly impacts how well you can show up, not consistently on the field, but when it really fucking matters. You know what I mean? When it really matters. So this is kind of, I hope that gives you guys some language and a framework to use when you're speaking with people that are really outcome performance kind of ROI driven.
And I was going to say, and what we also talk about is the fact that, again, in high performance spaces, that's where it matters the most.
Yes.
Right? So where you are asked to repeatedly produce over and over. And when we think about, because I think a lot of times when we talk about this language, we think about this just for the athletes, but what we see is even with staff, right? Being able to say, this is also for you, because when we think about the poor decisions that get made, when we think about people who have lost their jobs for impulsive decision making, right? Like, part of that is also, I've reached my threshold and gone over. So I think it's both the performance piece, but it's also the buffer from making some piss poor decisions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Coaches resonate with this a lot, right? Because a lot of their job is like decision making, and if they can understand that, like, me lowering that stress gives me more capacity during a game, that's helpful. I'm gonna go over this really quickly because a lot of you guys probably know this already, but just gonna give you some quick breathwork techniques. I want you all to leave with tangible habits. So I'm gonna have everyone kind of sit back, get comfortable, and I'm gonna count you through a nice breathing routine, okay? So it's called 4-7-8 breathing. Has anyone heard of this before? Oh, see, you guys are such pros. This is a really good one to use when you're really activated, your nervous system's quite activated. It's an easy way to kind of down-regulate your nervous system. I use this probably every night before I go to sleep. We're gonna inhale to the count of 4, we're gonna hold to the count of 7, and we're gonna exhale to the count of 8. I will count you. When you exhale, I really want you to drop your shoulders. Like, let those shoulders just loosen, okay? So everyone get nice and comfortable, and we'll go ahead. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well done, you guys just did a rep, let's go. So we do that 4 times, easy, simple, you can do it at your desk. That helps us kind of downregulate. Extended exhale is another really good one. So if you breathe in like deeply, and then you kind of like breathe in short inhale to kind of top the air off, and then a full exhale. So it kind of looks like this. You'll go. Right, y'all can try that if you want to. Do that 2 to 3 times. It's a great reset tool. And then if you're struggling with focus, right, let's say like our brain's a little bit scattered and I'm getting pulled to the future, pulled to the past, and I want to kind of settle in the present. Sometimes box breathing can be really helpful. I feel like this is a very common one, but you're going to inhale to 4, you'll hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. If you want to increase that to 5 because you have better lung capacity and you breathe a little bit slower, that's fine too. You can even increase it to 6. Just examples. At the end of the day, y'all breathe the way you want to breathe, right? Like, you don't get perfectionistic about, I got to breathe the right way, like it's got to be perfect. No, just breathe light, slow, and deep. Light being not like, right? Like light air, slower and deeper into our belly. That's it. That's the kind of breathing that helps us. These like more specific techniques help us train that. Making sense? Okay. Self-talk, y'all.
Room of high achievers and perfectionists.
Y'all, please take a photo of this slide, okay? Our self-talk, if I know anything about this room, probably not the best, okay? Just gonna be honest. We tend to be really self-critical, and it's, when we think about our self-talk, it's that internal automatic dialogue that is kind of running in the background constantly. A lot of us aren't even aware of this. The thing though is like our voice is a guide for our attention. So if I'm only ever thinking about, if I'm in threat detection, constantly thinking about all the things that could go wrong, that's where my attention stays. Imagine the impact on my well-being, right? It shapes the way we kind of see our perspectives. I think the 2 examples of like perspectives or like types of self-talk that we can incorporate that we know from the research are really, really helpful is this idea of like optimism. Sometimes when I say that word, people roll their eyes because it feels like overly positive and kind of like toxic positivity. But when we think about optimism, it's really like the belief that effort and persistence will lead to good outcomes. So it's kind of that belief, right? And if I continue working with this, I may encounter failure, I may encounter setbacks, but I know this is going to eventually lead in the right direction. We also see mistakes as specific. So it's like specific to this one situation. They're temporary. This is just now. It's not forever. And they're changeable. I can change something up to do something different. Sometimes when we work with people who have maybe depression or anxiety, they'll see those mistakes as pervasive, right? If I mess up here, it means that I'm this horrible person that's a failure. They'll see it as unending, like this is always going to be the case, and they're not changeable. I have no ability to change this. And so that type of self-talk can be challenging. The other thing to think about is just gratitude, right? This is really simple, but like noticing and appreciating the positive aspects of my life. I know this is sometimes hard to do in those moments of frustration, but I promise you, we see so much cool research. If I can shift into this stance mentally a couple times throughout the week, it massively helps our well-being. Okay, sound good? Okay, we're gonna work on this. And then lastly, mindfulness, like y'all all know mindfulness, I would imagine, right? Most everyone staying present and practicing the ability to be in the moment and being aware of our attention without getting carried away by it. But I think sometimes, I know for me, like it would be so great if I could sit down and meditate for 10 minutes every single day. That is so unrealistic for me. So sometimes I try to just center and ground my attention back in the present. So the way we can do that is, again, through our breath. Let me just take a minute and focus on what my breath sounds like and what it feels like. Let me just rein in on a visual cue, right? Like let's say I was feeling super anxious right now. Maybe I would just like center on like the color of the wall back there. It's kind of an interesting yellow highlighter color. Stop technique. I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna take a breath, I'm gonna observe what's happening, and I'm gonna proceed somehow in the present. Sounds, maybe like I'm outside and I'm walking to my car, and instead of getting on my phone and looking at my next to-do list, I just stop and kind of notice what I hear. Maybe I'm working on a really hard project at work, and all I'm doing is getting carried away at the outcome and wondering how it's gonna be and how it's gonna go, but I center back on, okay, what's important to me right now? What am I trying to do? I'm trying to share information. I'm trying to gather the best resources. Like, what are those process goals that I'm trying to accomplish, because that gives us a sense of presence and a sense of control. And then lastly, maybe it's sensory cues. So one thing like one of my players does, if you ever watch the Panthers, it'll be interesting to see. He'll be out on the field, and sometimes if he gets carried away in between snaps, he'll just move his foot like this, and he watches the blades, grass, or the turf move in one direction and then in the other. And so he kind of just like notices that, right? Just grounding, being present. Make sense? I can't say. You'll have to watch. All right, so I'm gonna let Nyaka take over here.
So now we want you guys to talk a little bit about how do you manage stress. Right? So when we I said we talk to the prospects about, what's your stressor, what's your tell, and then the last question is how do you manage your stress, right? What are your go-to stress management techniques? So we want you guys to spend a couple of minutes talking to each other, and thinking about what's one or two things I can do intentionally over the next couple of weeks. One of the things that we sort of borrowed from one of the clinicians is we do sort of this 2x4. The first time that we did this in front of a group of prospects, we tell them, so find, if you're at an 8 in terms of your stress, and you've got to go into a meeting, and you've got to figure out how to get from an 8 to a 2, and you've got 2 minutes, what's something that you can do to prepare, right? And so having them talk through, okay, here are a couple of things I can do. If you've got 2 hours, what are some things that you can do to manage your stress? If you've got 2 weeks, right, 2 days, 2 weeks. And so after the first session, we asked one of the players, like, what was the thing that you took with you from the conversation? He was like, that 2x4, right? That 2x4 strategy, that worked, like to think about it in that context, right? So if I've got to make sure that I've got a strategy, if I've got 2 minutes, if I've got 2 hours, if I've got 2 days, if I've got 2 weeks, what are things that I can do that are restorative, that will allow me to reset, to recenter? And so with that, we're going to give you guys 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes, tables, conversations.
The other thing I'll say really quick, guys, as you're getting settled, the QR code, you can scan it. It'll take you to a self-care assessment. You don't have to, don't do the assessment right now, but take a look at it and kind of see, how much of this am I doing, and maybe how much of this am I not doing, and what are the categories, and some of those good things. So it'll give you some ideas as well. But yes, please chat.
All right, 5 minutes, starting the timer. So since, all right. I love that folks are discussing strategies and making plans. That was the hope. So let's hear from a couple of folks. Something that something that you shared and something that you learned. And since I learned a new word today, flaneuring? Flaneuring. Okay. All right. So what do we got? What did we talk about here?
Explain flaneuring. Well, we were talking about the books that we're reading, and there was a really good one that Ken mentioned, How to Be Here by Rob Bell. Sounded really cool. And so he asked me what I was reading, and I said, I'm reading this book called The Art of Flaneuring. And flaneuring is wandering, W-A-N-D-E-R, intentionally. So basically just being present.
It's a mindfulness strategy,
right?
Right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I could have met you halfway. I thought it was interesting here. A couple of women gave up their devices, like their Apple Watches, their Oura Rings, or just the triggers that stress you out. And so, yeah, I battle with that all the time. I'm sure many of you do too.
So it's like it's a technology device that's designed to be helpful, but I find that for me it's more stressful. Same, like I used to wear a Whoop strap, and it's like checking my recovery it just got to the point where when I saw all the reds in a row, it was really disheartening. Right? So I no longer wear a Whoop strap. All right, anybody else? Yes.
So I'm currently doing a lot of somatic work and really understanding where things are showing up in my body. So if I'm feeling anxious, then I'm really stopping and being very intentional about noting where that is, because that's going to give me information and give my therapist information, so then we can really get to the root of it. So, and that stops. I love that you had that stop skill in there, because DBT has changed my life. If you don't know it, it's great, because you learn all these skills. So I will see that visual stop sign when the anxiety comes up, and I'll stop. Where am I feeling it in my body? If I need to describe it, I will, and I do all the things, I get it out, and then I can go back and focus on what I was doing, and pause and redirect. So that's helping me tremendously right now.
Excellent. I love it. Let's hear from one more group. Oh,
We kind of talked about using the art of free will. Like, we don't use it as much to its full extent. So either if it's like using mindful practices of like running down to the beach, doing an activity for an hour just so you can kind of refocus and use your mind, so you can kind of come back to the chaos a little bit better. So, yeah.
All right, and then we had a hand here as well.
We were talking about the physiological, how it manifests the stress, and so the tension in the body and the headaches and, upset stomach, so we were kind of talking about some of the things that we do to disrupt, because how a doctor would treat something acute, let's get the symptoms under control and then we can get to the root cause. So some of the things that we do to cause that disruption are getting out in nature, right? Hearing the birds and those sounds, doing yoga, stretches. One of our friends at the table was talking about if she can't sleep at night, she goes through her senses and is like, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What is my hand feeling right now? The sheet, So those are just some ideas that we do, or things that we do to cause that disruption.
And I think an important takeaway is that these are all things that you guys know, but we don't do intentionally, right? And so what the goal is to actually think about, what does it look like to incorporate this into my schedule on a consistent basis? That's that self-care that Joanne talked about, right? That idea of how do I make sure that I have the capacity. That's the everyday coping that we need to make sure that we are integrating intentionally. One of the things I encourage is the mindfulness piece, right? A lot of times people will say, well, I don't have the time to sit and meditate, but anything could be mindful, right? We can make anything a mindful activity, washing the dishes. One of the things that I joke around with players around is how many times you're supposed to chew your food, right? I asked them, like, what would having eaten lunch mindfully look like? Like, how many times do you choose players are like, what, 10 to 12, right? I think the research, it's like 32. Jeez. Right? But think about it. Like, how often when we're sitting down, it's literally like just shoveling food in for fuel. You don't really taste it, you don't smell it, you don't notice the textures, right? And so I think thinking about these strategies as things that really don't take a lot of time to implement, but the benefits and that compound benefit makes such a big difference. All right, talk about Ripple?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so we're on part 3, y'all. Almost done, right? Let's do it. We're gonna talk about the ripple effect. So what we mean by this is, like, how do we take some of these ideas, some of these strategies, and not only use them for ourselves, but extend them to the people in our organizations, the people in the communities that we help support. How do we integrate in a consistent, sustainable way? This is what we live every day. Like, a lot of the work that Inyaka does, a lot of the work that I do with teams is not just like, how do people come and meet with me, but how do we make the system healthier? Like, how do we offer different reminders? How do we support staff to better support players? Like, what are we doing in the system in a systemic way? Because I can't be the only champion of mental health in the building, right? Like, if I'm the only person talking about mental health, we're not gonna do well. And same with Inyaka. She can't be the only person in her job thinking about this. So how do we make sure that this is like across the board? So we have 3 strategies maybe like ideas that we're gonna kind of offer to y'all. But we'll share some examples, but a lot of this, we want a big discussion on this. So we can think first about culture. This is probably the most important one when we think about the spaces that work doesn't stop, right? Like, a lot of us in our jobs, if we're in the middle of a season and a player comes to me and says, hey, I'm feeling like I'm approaching burnout, I can't give him 2 weeks off, right? I can't give him a week off. He's got to continue doing that. And so what we see, and I think what Inyaka has really helped me understand, because she kind of sees the league at this like very global level, the buildings that are a little healthier in terms of their culture tend to have less burnout. They tend to have more sustainability. They're the ones where there's a level of psychological safety, right? Where people feel like they don't have to be perfect, that they feel supported. They feel like people genuinely care about the name on their back of the jersey and not just the number, right? Like, they feel humanized. And I think when you guys think about leaders, like as a leadership role, that's a tremendous amount of responsibility, but it's also a huge opportunity to shape the culture of your organization in a way that, supports this. And so the best kind of assessment of culture is asking your staff, how do you feel when you walk into work in the morning? Because that gives you a sense, right? Like, when I think about, I used to work in a lot of different spaces. I worked with a lot of different teams, and there would be some teams I'd wake up, I'd be super excited to go into. There would be other teams where I'd be like, ooh, okay. It's like, take a deep breath and walk in, right? A lot of this kind of relates to like when I walk into a space, like, what does it feel like? So there was one team, I won't say which team it was. I walked in before practice. Everyone was sitting apart. There was no music playing. There was no interaction between teammates. Everyone was quiet on their phone, and I was like, man, this is gonna be a tough team to work with, because there's not those belonging cues, there's not that connection. When we walked in this morning, y'all were all talking, y'all were connecting. Like, even in this room, there's been a better culture, right? Like, we're caring about each other. So those are the little signs we look for. And I don't know, has anyone read The Culture Code at all? It's a really good book to kind of like, if this is something you really want to be intentional about. This guy kind of went to all the really like high-performing businesses, sports teams, and some of the lesser performing businesses and sports teams, and kind of patterned out what are some similarities in the culture, and it gives you a little bit of a roadmap for that.
The second thing we can think about when it comes to this ripple effect is intentional programming. So like, am I doing things in an intentional way, offering opportunities similar to this morning that bring these topics front of mind and inform and educate and develop? And then the last thing that we'll kind of hit on is like some creative integration. So what are these like subtle reminders that just cue someone to, hey, this stuff matters, keep this on your radar? Do you have anything to add before I jump to the examples?
I was going to say something I can't remember, so it's all good.
So I will let Inyaka, we're going to kind of give you some examples of programming first that we've used with teams. Now, again, these might be more sport focused, but hopefully you can kind of take it and apply it in your world. I'll let her kind of speak on our rookie success program.
So sure, so every club is required to do rookie success. It used to be one big rookie symposium where they would sort of download all of this information into rookies, of course, in like 2 days, which you can imagine how sustainable that is, how much they actually take away from it. But what they've actually done is rookies are the players that have the most amount of time at the club per CBA, and that's because we know that there's a lot of learning that has to happen. And so while they're required to educate them on some of the, policy pieces, a lot of what I think the biggest segment of what they really have to learn is focused on wellness. So they're required to do sessions on decision making, right? How do we make decisions? What does that look like now? How might that shift when I go into the first season of my rookie year? Healthy relationships. So making sure that I can identify what are relationships that work for me, which ones I might need to put some boundaries and some buffers around. Mental health, making sure that there is some awareness of mental health. Again, thinking about that continuum. We talked about that self-awareness piece, and I think a lot of these sessions are really designed to increase self-awareness of players, right? So looking at their relationships, looking at sort of their awareness of mental health. I think it requires that for someone to be able to say, hey, you know what I have been doing has been dysfunctional or not helpful, and how can I be intentional in terms of making a change? Clubs vary in terms of, there's some sessions that they have to do, there's a number that they have to do every single year, but what we've seen is most of the clubs will actually work with their rookies throughout that entire year. So not just in that segmented time. Because we know that the challenges that they're going to experience in coming into a new space are going to be different from what the vets are experiencing. And so I think it's a way to sort of plan to lay a foundation that hopefully then carries with them as they go throughout their playing careers.
And I think the thing that's so strategic about starting with rookies is we know that's going to be a population that may have a higher risk of being stressed throughout the season, and so it's targeted and it's really intentional. We actually stole this from Inyaka, and we applied it to our first and second year surgeons in our orthopedic institute. And so what we were seeing is a lot of these surgeons are finishing up residency, coming into a system, and now they're in practice and they're not having some of those support structures that they had during training. And so we were like, hey, what would this look like if we incorporated it with those younger surgeons? And I have the outline on there, but we did once a month meetings. We fed them. That was huge. And we had some people from administration being the ones to lead this, because it showed even that, right? The administration was showing that they were investing in the young surgeons. I came in and did some talks. We did leadership development. We did just all the wellness stuff. Someone came in to speak about how do they get paid and what is RVU and volume, and so it gave a lot of clarity to that. And what we saw, like obviously the content was helpful, but the best thing we saw was the connection between that group. They are collaborating with each other. We've gotten feedback that they're helping each other with patients. They developed their own squad. They still meet and go out to dinner and beers and all the things with each other. And so we kind of gave them a way to connect and learn and grow, and it's really paid dividends, and we're continuing to see benefits there. So when you think about your organizations, who are those populations that may be at risk, that may be transitioning in or may be at risk to have some stress, and what are some ways that you can structure a program to support them and create an opportunity for connection? We do that with, at the Panthers, we know injuries are kind of a risk for mental health, and that's a hard time because your entire routine is disrupted, and so we have an intentional program around injuries to support players through that. And it's just built in, right? It's not something that someone has to opt into. Like, they don't have to make that choice. It's just a part of their rehab process. And so it normalizes it. It's a part of their day. It's structured. So again, very specific to our spaces, but I want you guys to think about, like, what could this look like in my organization?
And I think it's also helpful when we get a lot of feedback that, hey, as an organization, the organization is too big and it feels too dysfunctional at this level. But again, it allows you to sort of say, okay, what's the space that I have a little bit of control over, and how can I create something healthy within this small unit?
I think we presented to lawyers not too long ago, and like one little department, I guess, was going to create a book club. And like Monday mornings, once a month, having coffee, they were going to like talk about the books they were reading. And again, that's like very easy, right? It's kind of easy, but it's a way to just build in some connection within the institute. The other thing we'll kind of introduce are just some of these like creative integration ways to cue people to wellness. So we make a lot of card decks. So I don't know if you guys know this, but like athletes really enjoy playing cards. I did not know how much poker and boo-rah, I think is the game, like all these games in the locker room. And so I also know that like athletes tend to like very tangible strategy, let me take something and use it. And so we've made a rookie success deck. We give those out. I also made these for my building. It looks like a card deck. They're actually like mental health skills on the back. And so if someone's like having a day, I'm like, hey, pick a card. They're like, you're gonna do a magic trick? I'm like, kinda. They pick it and then it's a skill. So these are really helpful. Again, it's subtle, right? Like I might put them in someone's locker if I know they're if we had a hard session, I might follow up with this. Little subtle reminders that keep it top of mind. We also, like in our building, we have a lot of opportunity to put things up visually, right? So we'll put, like every week I have a different mental health, mental performance slide in our lift and our weight room that's just up there. And so I gave some examples there, and then we also, I like to create things, and so we made like a Train Your Brain series, and this going back to the stakeholder session, I think sometimes when it comes to mental health, it's kind of invisible, and people don't always know what that means if they haven't done a lot of work in that space. And so I create these cards, and it's like one topic, right? One skill. And I pass them out not just to the players, but to everyone in our football side of the organization, coaches, front office, scouts, everyone. And that way everyone starts to like see this, understand what it is. It's tangible, it's important. They might resonate with something. We try to tie it into coach's message so that it's all kind of related, but it's just, again, a subtle thing. It's just laid on their desk and we move on, but it's over time, like just little reminders. Is that fair?
But I think the other piece, and this is what Joanne's really, really good at, it's also making sure that everybody has the same language, right? When you're seeing the same messages over and over again, and when we talk about integration, like fully integrated, what we know makes a really successful wellness program is that it's visible and it's integrated, not sort of siloed off to one little side where today we're talking about mental health. It's really making sure that it is a part of the everyday language that we use.
So I gave some other examples. Again, if you're like me and you just want to create resources, because y'all have all the time to do that, here are some that you might want to create. I'm not going to go through all these, take a photo. We'll make sure you guys have these slides. But these are just some examples from all of the talks that Inyaka and I have done of things that might be helpful for people, for your staff, for organizations.
And some of those things you can actually find, right? And so being able to even just create a toolbox, because that's one of the things we talk about is developing your own personal toolbox where you've got sort of things that you can just pick up and implement whenever they're needed. So
yeah, like your self-care assessment, print that off for your staff, right? Put it on their desk. So again, this is what Ripple looks like in our space, but we want you guys to kind of get into groups and speak on some of these questions.
So what would it look like to implement something within your organization that could create that ripple effect? All right? And with that, we're going to give you guys another 5 minutes. And go.
I would say one of
Time is left.
from American Leadership Forum.
Wait, what? All right. Let's see what folks came up with. So let's hear from a couple of folks who have been able to identify a couple of changes that they're going to make over the next 12 months to sort of create that ripple.
Can I call on my table mate, Angie?
Sure.
Because she had a great practice with her team that I think is really awesome to share.
Okay, sure. We have something on Monday called Stand Up. And Stand Up is a time where it alternates. Everyone has like a turn where they have the wacky question. And you have whatever question you want, favorite Halloween costume, whatever it is. It just can't be work related. So it's a 30-minute meeting. We go around the room. Everyone has to answer whatever the wacky question is. And then we all, we have like a mission moment where we kind of talk about, a special story or something that happened. And then if anyone needs help from anyone else at the table, like, hey, I'll check in with you about this or that kind of thing. The most important part is the most important meeting of the week. It allows us to get to know one another. It builds a level of trust because you're able to trust people when you feel like that, I can trust that that they have positive intent. We've been laughing every week together. So it kind of builds that into the culture itself too. So to me, it's the most important thing that I do with my team every week is stand up. I hope you feel the same.
Was it, can I ask, was it intentional for you to put it on Mondays?
Yes, it was. Yeah, Monday kind of sets things up for the week. It tends to be a time where, like for us, most donors aren't trying to meet with me on Monday too, so it's a time we can kind of protect as well. So it kind of like sets up the week, and it's a time everybody can all be there, and it works for us Monday at 3. I don't know why, but it just works Monday at 3.
Love it. It's awesome. Can we get the sufficiently cared for question shared? I love that.
So I stole it from my husband, actually. When we first started dating, he would always ask me, do you feel sufficiently sufficiently loved and cared for? He actually saw it on a TikTok, so I don't think he's like actually that sensitive, but like he used to ask me, and he still does every Wednesday, do you feel sufficiently loved and cared for? And so I started asking my team members, they get asked at the beginning of the month, do you feel sufficiently supported? So that, and I also am very big on like honesty and transparency. So like if I make a mistake, it's not that I create a billboard saying I made a mistake, but I make sure my team is aware of it so that they know they can come to me with their mistakes and know that I will try to mitigate. Now, if I find your mistake, you're in trouble. But if you bring it to me, we're fine.
So I asked
my
her.
husband lost his wedding ring the day of our wedding, so like I said, do not take advice from this man. He found it on TikTok.
Well, I asked her, has any of her staff said no? Right? Which is awesome. But it gets permission. I love it. Other ways to create a ripple. You guys know at this point I will call on people, so. Okay, let's go here.
So I have a staff person who experienced a really traumatic loss recently. And, so I just directly said, I have time. If you need to talk to me about that situation, we've got at least 10 minutes every meeting that I'm going to allot for you to be able to talk to me about that. I have the capacity to do that for you. And I said, but I don't, if you're going to get divorced, don't talk to me about that. But, for this specific thing, I'm going to make sure that I make time because he's, works from home completely by himself and just doesn't have a lot of people to talk to about that. And it's a hard situation.
And so giving permission and space, right? Because a lot of times we aren't going to ask for permission, but to have somebody to offer it, for me, is a big deal. Absolutely.
Yeah, excuse me. I think for me that I really try to model what I'm going to do. So if I'm having a really bad day, other than the weights and whatnot, I'll just walk out and say I'm going home. but I have given my staff that same permission. If I walk in and they're slamming the window, at the talking to clients, I say like, okay, shut it down. We're going to shut it down, and we're just going to go home at 2 o'clock instead of trying to stay open until 4. So they're very comfortable, and thank God they don't abuse it. No one just every week wants to go home, but they know if they're having a really bad time that we'll just shut it down and go home. Let's try this again tomorrow.
Because I think in a lot of ways, the goal here, and especially the kind of work that you guys do, is sustainability, right? High performance in a way that is sustainable.
We were talking about the simple things that we all can just do on a daily basis. It's like, good morning, good night, everybody, have a good evening, and the power of when someone doesn't do that. And that just speaks volumes. And it just really takes 1 or 2 times, and it makes you feel like you're not really cared for and you're not valued. And then there's that vulnerable space that you need to work with. And then, so it just, the proof of caring and asking a question and being, and then we were talking about doing everything that you've just talked about and taking care of ourselves so that we can get outside of ourselves and say, how are you? And then ask that question and like, oh, tell me about that. Like, why in the world would you have, so now we're actually caring and going deeper to get the gold and create the connection.
Totally.
So
I think, like you guys are hitting on, it's all about relationships, right? That's a huge part of this, and like genuine relationships. And I love what you said. The book that I mentioned, Culture Code, frames those like small interactions as belonging cues, which I love that phrase. It's like subtle reminders that, hey, you belong and I care about you. And they kind of phrase like you need a steady pulse of belonging cues to feel kind of safe as a human, because we're such social creatures. So if I walk into a room and no one says hi to me, I'm instantly kind of in like a nervous, anxious state. And so I love what you said. It's not just doing it, it's the power of not doing it that can kind of impact someone.
And I have one that I didn't get to talk to my group about, but our calendars are like, well, for me, my calendar is a sacred space. And I didn't realize until I got in a leadership role that people actually look at my calendar. And so for me, self-care for me is therapy every week. So I stopped putting my therapy on my calendar as private and put it as I'm in therapy. Or I have 2 young children. So Maddie's has a doctor's appointment this day, so that my staff actually sees that I'm human too. And so it's modeling to them that if you need to go to therapy, go to therapy.
Awesome.
If your child has a doctor's appointment, go be with your child. And that has been very helpful for my team.
It's fantastic. There's another hand here.
Something that I do when we're in team meetings, you're always working on an agenda. Time is always of essence, so you always try to want to manage that time. Everyone's time's valuable, but when things come up in meetings that I kind of make note, I always try to loop back with the person if it's a conflict or a challenge, just to let them know that they've been heard, that I've heard them, and that I was listening, and how I can support them, or we try to strategize how we can solve a problem. But at least that in these environments that people realize that they are being heard, that people are listening, and that they are important, and that we do want to support them.
Fantastic. One of the things that and Joanne will tell you, our staff will, I like to say, there's no off season, it just changes cadence, right, in our space. And so, again, it's sort of an always on culture. One of the things that we encourage is, on days where you can leave the building at 2, leave the building at 2, because next week you'll be here until 2 a.m., right? And so, again, try to figure out how, even with a really high performance, really driven culture, figuring out what are some small things that we can do that allow us the space that we need to recover well.
I'm just curious. I mean, these are great ideas and lots of great suggestions. You guys work in the NFL. You got a lot of different generations in the workforce right now. I can imagine some of the older coaches may have a different reaction to the conversation around mental health than the younger generations. Do you guys have thoughts or suggestions on what that looks like as it shows up in the workplace? Because, you know, we were joking that, you know, we're Gen X, right? And so, you know, you would complain to your parents or you'd say something and, you'd talk about the grievances of the world, and they would say, you know, life's not fair. End of TED Talk.
Second.
Right? Like, let's go on. So how does that show up? And how do you encounter that conversation?
Yeah, I love that. There was like no space for emotions, right? It's like, nope, I walked uphill to work both ways, or whatever the cliche is. I'll let Inyaka speak to this, but in my experience, like I'm always, obviously my stimulus value as a therapist is like some people really want to talk to me, some people really don't want to talk to me. And so I'm very aware of the people that actively avoid me in the building, and then I strategically stalk them. Like I'll like be in the meal room when they're there. We'll get coffee at the same time. So I approach it much more from a place of like building a relationship with those people. I'm not going to go right in and try to tell them why mental wellness, why mental health is important. I'm going to try to be a person first and build a relationship with them, and then try to strategically weave sleep into the conversation. Or, you know, hey, what did you think about this that happened? And like bring up some kind of psychological concept and try, like my experience with older generations that maybe don't have as much exposure to mental health, mental performance, it's literally, they just don't have a lot of exposure to it. So I'll try to lead with like education or bringing value, and really, like, again, in sport, you can always frame it around performance. Everyone has the same goal. Everyone wants to perform. And so, like, I was just talking with one of our coaches about how many, like, decisions the players are having to make, right? Like, and he was kind of referencing that. And I was like, man, like, mental clarity is so important. And he's like, you know, it really is. Like, and just, like, saying some of those subtle things to, like, frame the conversation in that way. And then the more you build that relationship, the more you can have, like, deeper conversations about the benefit. I don't know how much that applies to your space, but that's typically the approach I take. It's more individualized, it's one-on-one, it's strategic. It's not like, hey, here's mental health. It's trying to be a little more subtle about it.
No, and I think, you know, to Joanne's point, a lot of times when they think about, oh, we're talking about wellness and mental health, they're thinking, oh, I've got to lay on the couch for an hour and cry and then not, you know, and not come to practice, right? Versus thinking about this in terms of how does this help me to optimize performance. So a lot of it really is the educational piece. One of the things that Joanne will do with everybody's required to do organization-wide mental health education, right? And so you can imagine some of the coaches like, oh, here we go. But making sure that conversation really is grounded in, while we think about the mental health piece, it's also grounded in performance. Right, so what we know is the mental skills that Joanne talked about for, you know, the self-talk and the mindfulness, those are beneficial for your well-being, and the research is very clear that they also help to improve performance, right? And so making sure that we're having that conversation so that they can recognize that they actually win when they are being intentional about addressing some of this stuff.
I found too, sorry, I just thought of this, like some of those cards that I throw around the building, like they'll apply them to their kids, right? So like the older coaches will be like, oh, I gave this to my 13-year-old who's like kind of struggling in baseball. And I'm like, ooh, that's cool. Like how'd they relate to that? And then if it's not about them, it's about people they care about, there's more willingness to talk about it. And then, so again, just kind of like mental health adjacent, but then slowly kind of like scaffolding them into the conversation.
And it's all wellness, right?
It's all wellness, yeah.
And so I think we want to be mindful of time.
Yes, I'm so sorry, yes.
I think, is that the last?
I think, yeah.
Yes.
Guys, please
Yes.
email us if you have any questions. We really enjoyed
Thank you.
speaking with you today. Thank you guys so much. And yeah, we'll be around. We'll hang around for a little bit. But yes, thank you guys. And
Oh
thank
my
you,
gosh,
Chair
thank
Charlotte.
you guys so
Of course.
much.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you, thank you. Just ran over completely. Appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to get out of here on time. I promise. I'm Tracy Russ. It is my joy to be a part of the team at Foundation for the Carolinas and the Robinson Center for Civic Leadership. Let's give it up and say a huge, huge thank yous to Dr. Inyaka Lamptey and Dr. Joanne Perry here at Novant Health. I think this session has been one of the best. They're all great, really applicable information and insight. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, thank you to Novant Health for hosting us here on behalf of the partners that are involved in the Agility Together series, Foundation for the Carolinas, Share Charlotte, United Way, and the Lee Institute. More to come. Next session is July 15th. We'll have information about that. I want to give you a quick heads up on the way out about another way that we are trying to help our community boost participation in your work and mission, and that is through a new platform, a civic empowerment platform called FFTC Forward. And I'm just going to talk for a second. At its core, this platform and this tool really is trying to solve for some very simple problems. But I want to start with some realities. One, that the scale of our community now continues to grow. We've got 3 million people in the region, and that means that both the set of challenges we're facing that you all know best because you're working on them, as well as the opportunities are at a scale they've never been before. 2, of those 3 million, we know that almost half of them, half of us, are bystanders. And that is a particular term I use from a Knight Foundation study, and what it means is that we've got around 45% who know that we are facing some issues and challenges, but they're not yet active. So that's a good thing if you think about, wow, there's a lot of opportunity there. What's holding them back? What's holding them back from being volunteers with your organization, donors, board members, advocates in the community, messengers, people who care and will talk about it and bring others alongside? What are those barriers? And we know from research and data in building this platform that there are 3 big ones. One is people do not know where to get information about issues that are important in the community from a trusted source. A part of that is some of the information is so complex it's overwhelming. But that's the first big barrier, information about what's important. Second one, access to visibility around how does what I care about connect with what you care about, instead of them being a set of isolated problems that are innumerable, because that too can be overwhelming. And the third one is, who's doing what about the issue that I care about? Who's doing what, and where do I or could I fit in? So of those 45% of this 3 million people, there are 3 problems to solve that are all connected. Information about important issues, how those issues connect, what I care about connect with what you care about, and who's doing what and where do I fit in. So Foundation for the Carolinas decided through the Robinson Center to offer a tool. It is not the whole solution by any means. And in partnership with Share Charlotte, what we're offering is simply gateways or starting points past each of those 3 barriers. And at fftc4.net, you will see 3 tools. Access to information that is packaged and curated and simplified on 17 key topics with more to come. I'm really happy, given today's conversation, that the 18th folio will be on mental health. Youth development is the 19th, and so on and so forth. We'll keep adding. Access to information. And when I say issues and packaging, I mean really simple. This is the folio. This is what we call them by issue on healthcare. It's about 500 words total. It is meant to be simple and about a 5-minute read. There's another one on literacy. Who's doing what in literacy? How does it connect with other issues? And if you're an animal lover like I am, there's a folio on animal welfare. And these are just 3 of the first 17. That's the starting point for access to information. Second, a tool called Intersections will let anybody pick 3 topics, see how they connect and how they affect each other in real time. It is driven by AI. It draws only from sources that are credible that we've told it to point to, but it is a way for you to see what you care about connects with what someone else cares about. And then finally, in development, visibility around who's doing what. And you will have an opportunity soon for your organization to be a part of what we call MAPs, simple visualizations of who's doing what on each of these key topics. We are not going to ask you to respond to questions that you've already been asked in other surveys. We're being very intentional about that, working very closely with Share Charlotte. So if you've been asked to fill out questionnaires, surveys about your organization, I get it. We're only adding 6, 7 questions that are more relational. Who do you work with? How often? What's the nature of that connection? So that we can bring visibility to you. So we're trying to do 3 things. We're trying to get more of that 45% of that 3 million engaged, involved. We're trying to bring them to you, to activate them and give them a way to do something about something that they care about. That is the heart of FFTC Forward. There's a lot more to come. A habit I would love to offer is to take a look and share it inside your organizations with colleagues. The intersections tool's particularly fun to play with. If you want to see how animal welfare and healthcare and digital equity might connect, it'll tell you in about 30 seconds. We're looking forward to working with you to bring more of that 45% to move people off of the bench, so to speak, away from the bystanders and to you as advocates, as donors, as volunteers, as board members, as messengers, and people who care. And with that, anything else? We have a next session coming up. I have the clicker, thanks. On July the 15th, and this is on navigating what is called the Big Beautiful Bill and the inherent tax code changes, specifically those that affect donors to you, your donors, your people. I'm so proud that Doug Benson, who is my colleague at the foundation and a foundation expert, will be with us to share knowledge about that. We are available with that kind of expertise to you at any time. So it's not just this workshop. Anytime, reach out. And then the next one, we'll talk more about what's ahead on August the 12th for our community and our region moving forward.
Just to note, the next session in July is at the Charlotte Museum of History. And for everyone that gets to go, you get a free pass to the virtual America's 250 exhibit that they have there as well. So come learn about tax code changes and celebrate the history.
And we know it's not an exciting topic, but it is an important one, and count on the foundation to have data and all kinds of insights around that. But mainly, I want to leave with a thank you to all of you for what you do in our community and our region. And that includes not only those of us in the room, but those online. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Thanks.